back in the course web based decision support system for business decisions. And so far we have been going through individual modules or individual subsystems of the decision support system. As we discussed earlier, the DSS, the decision support system, from the standpoint we have, is divided into 4 parts. Okay. The part 1 is the DBMS, the database management system. We already had gone through that. Then we talked about it was the knowledge based management system, and then MBMS, model based management system, as the second component we had gone through that. Then the user interface was the third one. So, today we are going to discuss the user interface as the third one, and after that we will go into the knowledge based management system. So, UI system or user interface system for decision support system is what we are going to talk today. Okay. So, the first we will start with the components of UI subsystem. Okay. Some people call it as, also call this as UIMS, which stands for user interface management system. Okay. UIMS. Okay. So, in this case we are going to talk about what are the components, the major components of the UI subsystem. Okay. So, the first component we are going to talk about is GUI. Okay. Everybody talks about this, or what the main abbreviation of it is, the abbreviation is graphical user interface. Okay. That is the expansion of the GUI. And what is it actually? Okay. There are so many definitions available on this topic, but for the time being, for this course, this is the definition that we are going to use. It is a system of interactive visual components. Okay. It is a set of interactive visual components for computer software. Okay. So, the main thing here is they are visual components, okay, that is why it is graphical, and are interactive. Interactive means the user can interact with the system. User can interact, or user can use it to interact with the computer system or the computer software, right. So, from a functional viewpoint, okay, if you look into the functional viewpoint of what GUI does, okay, we can say that a GUI displays objects that convey information, Okay. So, a GUI displays objects that convey information and represent actions that can be taken by the user, Okay. So, the important thing is it displays objects. Okay. First thing is it displays objects. Where does it display the objects? On a computer screen. For the time being, we talk about as a computer screen or a monitor. Okay. And what does these objects do? They convey information. Okay. Information to whom? Okay. Information to the decision maker. Okay. And what happens this when this convey the information, and it also represents action that can be taken by the user. So, for example, if a button is provided, okay, with save written on it. Okay. So, what it does is, okay, the action is click the button is the action, right, and the information that it conveys is, if you click this button, then things will get saved, some information will get. So, the information is storing data, this is the information. So, if you click this button, it will store the data or whatever it is, something will get stored in the computer. Okay. So, that is the idea, right, and the object here is the button, that is the object. Okay. So, the action is click, The object is the button, and the information provided on the button is that if you click this button, it will store data or whatever it is in the computer. Okay, fine. Then comes something the normally known as NLP, okay, and it is natural, okay, language processor or processing. Okay, we can call it as, okay, processing, processor, either way. Okay, it's okay with us. NLP stands for natural language processing or processor, and processing or processing is like, it's, you can think about as an ability or a set of program or something. So, what we say here is, we are going to say, define this for this course is that the ability of a computer program, ability of a computer program, okay, to understand, okay, your ability of a computer program to understand human language, okay, to understand human language as it is spoken or written. What we are talking here is the computer program, it imparts a capability or ability of the computer program to understand human language. It could be English, it could be French, okay, Hindi, doesn't matter. Okay. The ability of the computer program to understand human language, whether you speak it or you write it. Okay. So, write it, or in a way you can also think about writing it as typing it, okay, using a keyboard or something like that. So, the natural language processing or processing gives or imparts the capability to the computer to translate human language, understand it and translate it into computer instructions or computer language. Okay. We can call it a programming language, whatever you want to call it as part of it, right. So, one component is GUI, second component is the NLP. Okay. Then the third one is, it's a component, but what this component does is, this is a specific modules. These modules are usually hidden, okay, you really do not see them. Okay. What it does is, it deals with model management or MBMS and data management, DBMS. Okay. So, the user interface also provides specific modules, mostly hidden modules, that can interact with the MBMS, the model management system, or the database management subsystem. So, why? For database management system to deal with the data, and with model based management system to deal with models. Okay. So, that is the other part. So, it has that hidden aspect of the, mostly hidden, or what you call as transparent. You rarely do not see how it actually connects to the database. So, then as the other part is the certain additional capabilities that could be added into it. One aspect is what you can call it as speech detection. Okay. So, you have a microphone, digitizer, etc., a combination of technologies which converts a human speech into, understands it into text and then convert it into computer instruction. Then another one is the gesture interface. Okay. So, it is like hand gesture, or you sometimes in a computer or in a touch screen, most of us have used this two fingers in the mobile to zoom. So, if you do like this, then the things get zoomed into the mobile interface. So, that is where your gesture is, and certain times you might have taken selfies, and there is a way in a camera, you take a mobile phone, keep it there and you wave your hand like this, then the selfie happens after that hand wave. So, this is like called like understanding gestures. So, this is the gesture interface. So, interface provides you to understand human gestures and translate into some action. And then the third one you can think about it is tactile, okay, tactile interface. Okay. And there are many more, but the tactile interface is touch. Okay. So, what happens is, in certain times when you have a mobile keypad, you know that when you type the keypad, it gives you tuck 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 sound, that gives you, that's one response, that you touch the key. Other thing is when you touch the key comes up and it gives you vibration. So, that means yes, I have touched the key and the vibration confirms that you have touched that particular key. So, that are the additional. So, that is another component of the GUI, but that also is a capability which adds as a component of the GUI. Okay. So, now with this, okay, these 4 components, now we go into what I call as the UI structure, right. By the way, this structure is in relation to DSS, okay, and the business or corporate. Okay. This discussion is mostly based on the DSS that is meant for the corporate or the business decisions. So, as we said, okay, the major components, as we have earlier also mentioned, it is data management and DBMS. Okay. So, dealing with the data and DBMS. The other one is, the second component is the knowledge base management system, okay. And then the third part is model management and MBMS. Okay. So, these 3 components, which are the database management system, knowledge base management system, model based management system, all the 3, okay, are interacted or interfaced using what we call as user interface management system. Okay. We can call it as UIMS, user interface management system. So, this user interface management system interacts bidirectional interaction with the database management system, the knowledge base management system and the model based management system. Okay. It bidirectionally interacts with them. Okay. Now, there is, but the user also needs to interact with the system, right. So, below this you have the next layer, what we call as the natural language processor or processing, you can call it NLP. Okay. That also does bidirectional interaction with the user interface management system. And what does the NLP does? Okay. NLP deals with what we call as the stick figure, okay, user. Okay. So, the user is supposed to interact with the using NLP. Okay. I am going to do kind of a dotted line here, only because this interaction is not just like an interaction. For this interaction you require what we call as a so, you require a computer. Okay. So, the user using a computer, both of them combined together, okay, deals with the use the natural language processing to, okay, interact with the computer. Okay. And the thing is, you have to also understand there is 2 subparts to this. Okay. One is called as the, I will call it as input. Okay. There is action, language, etc. Right. So, the user need to provide the input using the computer and natural language processing to make sure that the user interface management system captures that input and do what is required. Okay. And then the second part of this is, the second component of this is the output. Once the model or whatever it is invoked, the output has to come out, okay, and the output comes in the form of a display, okay, and language typically. So, okay, the input is in the language of the user goes in, and it translates to. So, you can say that goes this way. Let us put it this way: input language of user, okay, that is in the natural language, gets translated to computer language, whether binary, hexadecimal, we does not matter. Okay. It could be binary, whatever it is. Okay. That is done. Okay. So, this input basically happens that way, and then what happens is we draw it in this side. Okay. Okay. The output. So, the output which is in the computer language, okay, this is translated to human language. Okay. So, here is the input, okay, and this is the output. Okay. So, the human being uses the computer, or the user uses the computer and input language and etcetera to convey the input to the system using the user interface management, and the output of the system is conveyed back to the user by doing this. Okay. And in the output you can also connect it to us. Okay. You can think about it as there is an additional component of printers, plotters, etc. Okay. So, that means sometimes you may have a graph that you may want to print it. So, you have additional output devices attached with it, whereas with input you can think about it as keyboard, monitor, etc. are also attached as part of the system. Okay. So, this whole thing that we just see here, okay, this entire stuff, okay, you can think about it as the user interface management system. The user interface management system is mostly hidden. There is a layer of separation. Okay. The user deals with the user interface management system using the natural language. So, I hope you understand what happens is. So, where does the GUI comes into picture? So, the GUI typically resides on the, that is what is presented to the user in the monitor in this regard. Okay. So, now let us move to the next one, the GUI, because GUI is the primary way in which the user interacts with the system. Okay. So, the GUI designer, okay, or the team that designs the GUI needs to worry about the primary focus, okay, worry about with respect to DSS, business DSS, or business decisions. Okay. What do we need to do when the DSS is aimed at a corporate DSS or a business DSS, right? The major considerations, worry about in a way we are talking about is the major considerations. Okay. So, the number one consideration, the first part they need to consider as part of this is something like layout, okay, the layout of the user interface, okay, or the GUI, graphical user interface, layout of the GUI. Okay. What does this entails to? What does this layout entails to? Okay. The layout related to buttons, text, table, figures, graphs, audio, video, etc. Okay. So, all these aspects, whether it is the buttons, text, table, figures, graphs, audio, video, where it would. So, if you think about your screen as a real estate, I will place all my buttons here for the time being. The video file will be at this bottom corner, the audio file will be at this corner. So, you decide how this is being relatively placed in the layout. How, I am just saying it's a possibly poor layout, but that you get the point, right. So, that is the first part. Second part, okay. This is very important, structuring of the data entry. Okay. So, what we call it as the sequence in which data is captured in the UI. Okay. So, how do you capture the sequence in which whether you, so if let us say you have a height, weight, address, etc. So, or you fill lot of your address format or your personal details. So, usually you take the first name, then the middle name, then the last name, then the date of birth, MMDDYY, house name, street name, city, pin code, state, country, etc. So, that sequence, how does that sequence came into picture? Okay. So, that structuring of the data entry, the simplest term for this is also known as tab order. Okay. Somebody says tab order. So, in the GUI, I will first input. So, if you think about again there, you have the 3 forms in which you have, or 3 text boxes in which you are filling the data. So, I will go here first, then here second, and from then the tab will move to here, which is the third. So, this order of the tab ordering, when you press the tab button, how the tab moves from one input box to another is also determined. That is the structuring of the data entry, right. Then the third part we need to discuss as part of it is the controlling of data input. Okay. How do you control the data input, right? And lot of these things, okay, it involves 2 major aspects as part of it: validation. Then the other part we need to talk about it is format controls. Okay. So, if you have, let us say for an example, in this case is you have your date of birth is captured. Okay. So, let us call it as DD MM YYYY. Okay. If this is the format it is given to you. So, this is the format control. Okay. You can also capture it as DD MM YY also. Okay. In this case you have to give the entire year as part of it, right. Now, that is one part. Now, how do you do validation? Okay. One of the way to do validation is, for example, M should be between 0, 1 to 12. Okay. You cannot have a value of 23 given for month, because there is only 12 months as part of it, right. The date is can vary from 0, 1 to 31. You cannot have 32 or something. So, depending upon what it is, and this combination means January is 31 days, February, okay, 27, 28, whatever it is, depending upon the leap year. Okay. So, that kind of things as part of it. And then the third part is you can think about the year. Similarly, whether the year, the date of birth, you cannot have a date of birth of tomorrow. Maybe you might be inputting the date of a today born child. So, that today is allowed. Tomorrow you do not want to give the date tomorrow, you do not want to give an year which is 2025 or something like that, because that is not possible as part of that, or for a date of birth. Okay. So, that type of validation is also part of the GUI design, right. Then comes the fourth part, which is the feedback. Okay. Is very critical as part of this. Okay. Feedback to the user. Okay. It is supposed to provide feedback, and the multiple type of feedbacks are expected out of it. Number one is prompting. Okay. So, if you say, shall I delete, if you delete a file, are you sure, are you confident? It is like Amitabh Bachchan asking, are you sure, are you confident, tara lag jaye. So, those kind of things are all what you call as prompting the user to make sure that this is what you want to do to validate that. Second one is the status. Okay. Status is really interesting. One of the example of status is you seen probably this kind of an image in a computer where you have some hourglass image, right, and this shows that I am busy. Okay. And or sometimes you might have seen this beach ball in Mac that rotates, okay, which basically tells you that I am busy doing stuff, right. So, that tells you the status of what is going on in the system, right. Then comes what we call as warning. Okay. Warning, all the data will be erased, do you want to continue. So, warning basically comes up with something like a image like this with an exclamation mark, which tells you, okay, here is a warning given to you, pay attention to this kind of a thing. And then the last one is part of it is the error messages. Okay. It says, with Windows, the classical function is, you wanted me to do something, I am sorry, I can't do it, I am going to give you the blue screen. That is an example of a error message. Okay. So, that is the fourth aspect of it. Okay. Then comes the last aspect, fifth aspect. Okay. Fifth one is dialogue sequencing. We will see what this is, but the dialogue is how the user interfaces with the system. So, in which is the sequence, you do something, the computer responds, then you do something, the computer responds. That is one way to think about sequence. Or when you open a particular user interface, the computer immediately gives you a response which prompts you for something, and then based on your response it comes up with what to do next. Okay. So, that is also the other aspect of GUI design. So, these 5 aspects are the major things that a GUI designer or a design team, when you create a graphical user interface for a decision support system, a decision maker in corporate world, there are other things you can worry about, but these 5 are the most critical aspects that you need to worry about when we come to these aspects. Okay. So, we just mentioned about dialogue, and I wanted to make sure that what is a dialogue is. So, let us take a look what is a dialogue. Okay. And this is a critical one, because most of the time people does not realize, okay, what dialogue is. It is ideally, it is in a very simplistic term, it is a sequence of interactions. Okay. It is an order of interactions between the system and the user. Okay. System, in this case we can talk about the DSS or a computer system, whatever you want to call it. Okay. Okay. And the user is a human being. The user here is the decision maker. Okay. So, the sequence of interactions, and there is in broader sense with respect to DSS, to business DSS, 3 levels. Okay. 3 levels of dialogue we can talk about. Number 1, this is called lexical. Okay. Lexical sequence of dialogue means the shape of icons, okay, actual keys pressed, etc. Okay. So, maybe once you press a key, it will button will pop up, all those kind of things, or whether it will go gray, whatever it is, that is all part of it, right. Second one is what we call it as syntactic. Okay. Syntactic, the order of inputs and outputs, not just the order of input, it is the order of inputs and outputs in an interaction. Okay. So, take any one interaction, a specific interaction, the sequence, the order in which both inputs and outputs happen is also associated with the dialogue. So, that is a syntactic dialogue. And the third one is the semantic. Okay. So, the effect of dialogue, okay, on the internal application or data is considered. So, what happens, what is the effect? Okay. So, you say run this model. So, then what is the effect of running, okay, of that, or that application is what is the part of this. Now, comes the dialogue. How do you design the dialogue? Okay. So, we mentioned here it is a GUI design, and this dialogue sequencing is a critical component. So, hence how do you design the dialogue? Okay. So, it has 3 aspects to it. Okay. Again, we deal with most of things in 3s, I believe. Okay. So, designing a dialogue sequence, that is the first part. I mix both spellings, both UK and US spelling, so you can read both. So, first you design the dialogue sequence, okay, how the user will interface with the and system will interface with that. Then second one is build the prototype. Okay. And then you do is assess the usability of the prototype. Okay. Once you do this, first you do is you design a dialog sequence, build the prototype, you design this one, and then the fourth step is refine as per feedback. So, even though the design part is only this first three, the fourth one is you need to make sure that the dialog sequence or order etcetera are updated or refined based on the feedback that you got from the user. Okay. So, the next topic is the GUI principles, and this is also taken from the direction of how is it is important for a business DSS is what we will be talking about. Whatever the principles that are important for that is what we will be considering here. This will be part of the next lecture. We will start the next lecture from here. Thank you.